Good morning, everyone. This is Fran Lewis. This is MJ Network in memory of my sister, Marcia Joyce, who started me off. And we have the author of After Pearl. This book is really exciting. 1942 war rages in Europe. Pearl Harbor still smolders. An alcoholic private eye, Nicholas Bishop, wakes up on a hotel room with two slugs missing from his gun. Oh, God. The cops think he's murdered lounge singer Pearl DeGay. Well, we're going to find out more because I'm not going to tell you anything. And the author is here. And of course, I couldn't put the book down. I read like 10 a week.
Wow.
It frightens me too, yeah. But this one I just sat down and read. So, how did you create, Nick? And what's a short summary to give viewers? Because when this goes on YouTube, everybody listens to it afterwards.
Yeah, thank you for having me, first of all.
Oh, I'm
Nicholas,
thrilled. You have no idea. I'm meeting so many people. I'm not used to seeing people face to face because it used to be on Blog Talk.
yeah,
So I'm
yeah.
getting used to people seeing me with my crazy color hair.
Well, thanks again for having me. Nicholas Bishop was an interesting character, and he kind of came into my life in a strange way, I guess. I had watched a movie the previous night on Netflix or something, some streaming service about a detective. And it was, I don't know, I was annoyed by it. It was a detective that we had all seen before, at least I've all seen before, with, very one dimensional, kind of a cliche character going back to the old hard boiled detectives, from Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett. And I was kind of annoyed with it. And I was still annoyed the next day. And I was sitting in a bar nursing a drink, thinking about it, thinking about my next project, what that could be. And Norman Mailer said that writing is a spooky art, right? Because these ideas come from nowhere, it seems, and they pop in your head. And as I was sitting there, I thought of this man, a friend of my mom's. I haven't thought of him in 30 years. Um, my mom and her friends growing up called him Mickey the Bug because he was kind of like this insect-like guy, and he was a gambler and kind of shady. And during World War II, he stepped in front of a cab, or he got hit by a cab when he was in San Francisco waiting to be deployed to the Pacific. And he was drunk at the time. And once he healed from his injuries, they were so severe that he was never deployed. They sent him back
Mm.
home to Buffalo on a medical discharge. And I'm thinking, and a light bulb went off. I said, well, this is my character. This is going to be my private eye. He's going to be an alcoholic. He's going to be kind of a questionable, shady character. Did he try to avoid the draft by stepping in front of this cab? Was it an accident? Was he pushed? I want to give the results of that accident. I want him to have consequences. So one of the consequences of stepping in front of that cab or being pushed or doing it intentionally was a damaged foot. So now he walks with a cane. And I wanted him to be kind of an insect-like character, kind of shady, and that's where the idea of Nicky the Weasel, as people call him, or Nicholas Bishop, his full name, popped into my head as a character, and I said, "That's my private eye."
There's something about him you have to like. You can't not
Well,
like him.
well,
Rebel.
that's
He's like a rebel, but I've been reading too many books lately. And
well,
sometimes I get like, oh God, why did I read this one? It's so whatever. So why does he always get drunk? And
well,
who
he's an
is Benny? And he does jobs for him. But there are a lot of people are writing about people that can't handle it. They get drunk. When I can't handle it, I drink more coffee.
well,
That's my
Nicholas,
my go-to. I drink coffee. So how
well,
come he
Bishop.
gets drunk?
Yeah, well, coffee isn't going to help Bishop, I don't think, too much. One of the things I mentioned already, I wanted my character to suffer some consequences from his actions, and and that was again a direct result from these depictions of private eyes in the movies and in books where there's no consequences. And everyone is familiar with the hard drinking private eye, but you
Mm.
never see him hung over. You never see him in the depths of alcoholism and the consequences of alcoholism. And you see that definitely in the Scudder series
Mm.
from Lawrence Block. But I wanted to kind of take that on. And so Bishop is an alcoholic. He's trying to get sober. When the novel opens up, he's lost everything. He's lost his detective agency. He's lost his
Mm,
apartment. He
that's
can't find
sad.
his car. And he's lost his secretary, who he's secretly in love with. Again, kind of playing off the typical stereotype of the private eye who just gets all the ladies. This guy is not a ladies' man, and he's has this unrequited love for Gia. But to get everything back, he needs to get his drinking and his alcoholism under control. So when he wakes up in that hotel floor, he can't remember the last 5 days of his life because of an alcoholic blackout. And part
Hmm.
of the mystery is he's got to piece together those 5 days to find out what happened and try to get his life on track.
It's not unusual for junks to feel like that. Not unusual for them to forget what happened. That's even scarier.
Yeah, he's gonna go through everything. The blackouts, the shakes,
That's
the
scary.
withdrawal from alcoholism, learning what he did during those blackouts. So I'm glad you said that, you found him likable by the end of the book, because in the beginning he's not very likable, right? But I think at the bottom of it, Bishop has a good heart. He's loyal to his friends. He's funny, which makes him a little bit more appealing to readers, and I hope they care about him to see if he can make it through his struggles.
Why? Because you're going to bring them back again?
Yes, I am. This is the
Oh,
first
good.
time.
I'm reading so many, but I said it to one of the authors the other day. How could you not bring back this character? There's like an open ending. The author didn't realize it. I realize things most people don't, but still, I said, how could you not bring this person back? It's like too good to be true.
Well, thank you for that. It's funny when I wrote this, I call it my pandemic novel because I wrote it right. I started right before the lockdown, and I wrote it pretty much for myself.
Uh-huh.
I didn't think it was going to be published, or didn't really have any intention of publishing, although I'm sure it was in the back of my mind. But what I was doing is I was trying to, we read to escape. I was trying to write to escape from the pandemic and the lockdown. I had kept my job, thankfully, so my 9 to 5 never changed. But after 5 o'clock, I was, living alone in a big house with a little one-eyed dog. So I wrote this book for something for me to do, something for me to read. And when I finished it, I sent it on to my writers group, and I sent it first to Carla Dameron, who's a wonderful crime fiction writer, and she wrote The Orchid Tattoo. And the first question she asked me after she read it was, "Is it a series?" And like your author that you interviewed, I said, "Oh, no, 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 it's just a one-off. I wrote it during the pandemic." So she gave me she goes, "I think it would make a good series." And she gave me some suggestions that I took
Mhm.
and revised and sent it to another person in my writing group, a wonderful writer named Ashley Warlick. And Ashley read it. And then the first question that she asked me was, "Is this going to be a series?" And I said, "Oh, no, no, no. It's a one off. I wrote it during the pandemic." And then I took her revisions and I sent it to my publisher. And he goes, "Well, is this a series? I think Netflix would like something like this if it was a series." And I thought, yes, it's a series.
You don't realize it. No, my when my mom died and my sister told me I looked like a fat couch potato. I weigh 90 pounds. I weighed like this much. And she said, "Why don't you write a book?" Well, before she died, she wanted to kill me because I wrote the book was about growing up in the South Bronx with her.
Mhm.
And I told the two stories of the crazy things that she made me do or I had to do. So my birthday series, yeah. No, I write horror. I
Yeah.
kill
So,
I Yeah, I write horror. But if you do something wrong, the mirror knows you're gonna wind up as a face in the mirror forever. I
oh
scare
boy.
people. That's
Yeah.
I don't know. The people don't understand it. So he does jobs for Benny, but this leads back to the fact that he gets drunk because he didn't know where he parked his car. And there are
Yeah.
people in the world that have no idea where they park their cars. I mean, you could just park it here and then 5 minutes later go, where did I put it? Especially if there are cars looking at it. So he didn't know where it was, which makes
Yeah, and
sense.
that's part of the novel is where's his car? Is there a body in the trunk? And Bishop's trying to find that car before the police do. And you're right, you know, he's one of the things he's trying to
Mhm.
piece together during this 5-day blackout is where's his car? Who is the woman he remembers in the car? Um, and he's trying to find that. So he's in a really tough position as the novel opens. And Benny is a
Yeah.
friend of his. He's a World War One vet with PTSD. He kind of lives on the street. He's a junk man. He basically finds things and pawns them. But he's also a friend of Bishop's, and Bishop hires him sometimes to be the eyes and ears on the street because Benny walks all over the city looking for things to pawn and sell. And Bishop, as I said earlier,
Mhm.
you know, he's handicapped. He walks the cane, and now he can't find his car. So he asks Benny to keep an eye out, and he does that throughout the book, asking Benny to do
Yeah, he does.
help him with his investigation. So Benny's a fun character to write, and I think a very gentle soul in the book.
Well, the one thing I have to say, because like I said, I read too many books. And then yesterday, believe it or not, on Sunday, I received four from one publisher.
Oh wow,
You were
that's
supposed
good.
to only send one. You sent four. And then there were three more that I'm staring at inside. I actually read one yesterday, a whole one.
That's great.
Yeah, well, it was about mental illness. So I said, what the heck?
Oh,
Yeah, it's your story. So he's a suspect for murder. I know that. So who is Frank? And tell us about the Ira Laws firm. Everybody has a relationship with him, but that's interesting. That's what made it interesting.
yeah, I try to create this world, you know, in a part of Buffalo, New York, where my parents and my grandparents grew up. Um, it's the Genesee and Oak Street area where the all the Greek immigrants first um, first built the church and then you know lived near the church. And so I picked this neighborhood because my parents grew up in the 30s and 40s, and I grew up listening to their stories, and it seemed
Mm.
to make sense to me to place the novel, centralize it there. So I try to create this world of, you know, who lives in this neighborhood? Who are Bishop's friends, his acquaintances, his enemies?
Hmm.
He's got a bunch of those. Um, and like Benny, Frank is a bartender, or Frank is one of his acquaintances, I guess. He's a bartender at the Kitty Cat Club, which is really it sounds nicer than it is. It's really a day drinking bar, an alcoholics bar, a drunk bar, if you will.
Mm.
And Bishop's trying to find his car. He's trying to figure out the last 5 days of his life. He knew he was at the Kitty Cat celebrating a case that he had solved earlier. Um, and he went in to trying to find out what happened. And Frank's the bartender in there. And so this is the first example of Bishop learning from someone else about his behavior and what he did during that blackout 5 days that he can't
Or did he
remember.
do it? Now we
Yeah.
come to an interesting character. I have to read some. I have so many questions. Who was Elizabeth Brand, and why did she hire Nicholas? Then we're going to get to a character that I thought was cool, as Meyer.
Um, yeah. Bishop, like I said, he's lost his detective
Yeah.
agency. He has become the hotel detective at the Hotel Lafayette, which he thinks he's the which he thinks is the lowest rung on the detective scale. But he also takes work from an attorney, Ira Weiss, and Ira is sends work to Bishop, and a lot of it is doing you know, adultery cases. And he hires Bishop because Ira has a new client, a socialite in town, and she comes to him because she thinks her husband is having an affair.
Mm.
And Bishop, hired through Ira, his job is to find evidence of this adultery. And so that's how Bishop gets introduced to kind of like the socialite world in Buffalo, um, the painter husband that may be having an affair.
Mm.
All the characters are kind of coming together right now.
So now we've got Meyer and he works for the Art Institute, and he painted. So why did they call him the Weasel? Not that I blame them, but okay.
So Meyer is the husband who of
Mm,
Elizabeth Brandt. He's Meyer Brandt. He married into money. He is a painter. He paints at the Art Institute in Buffalo. Um, and Bishop, is hired to basically follow him and find out if he is having an affair or not. So Nicholas Bishop is the one they call Nicky the Weasel. And they do it because he really doesn't have a strong moral
mm.
compass, if you will. And again, this goes back to the way detectives are portrayed. Often they're, former or current police officers, police detectives who have a higher moral sense than the police department or the judicial system, and they take matters into their whole own hands. Bishop is not like that. Bishop is a great character. If you offer him a bribe, he'll take it and then call the cops on you anyways. Plus, he is gotten this reputation of working for Ira, doing adultery cases. So he's trailing people, looking through curtains, hanging out outside of hotel rooms to get the photographs. And he gets this
Yeah.
nickname that he doesn't like of Nicky the Weasel. And it goes back to that inspiration, Nicky the Bug, my mom's friend who may have stepped in front of that cab on purpose. It goes back to him, kind of that shadowy character.
Well, here's a whole bunch of questions at one time.
Okay,
The
fire
character that
away.
I loved the most was Gia. I love
Mhm.
Gia, and he needed her. So now we have Gia. We have Cruz, Emmy, and how did they finally realize that Pearl was dead? She's the main point of the book, that she was dead. This person, and who was she?
Well, first I'll start with Gia, and everyone
Yeah,
who's read has read the book so far, and it doesn't come out until May 1st.
we don't want to
So
give it away.
yeah, so we don't want to give too much away. But Gia, everyone loves Gia, and she
Yeah,
was
I love
great fun
Gia.
to everyone, and she was great fun to write. Um, Gia actually came from some criticism of my previous novel, Yesteryear, which is about Franz Stryker, the man who created the Lone Ranger. Um, and that was kind of like a buddy book, if you will, meaning he and his best friend were kind of like the Lone Ranger and Tano trying to solve a caper. And one of the criticisms from that book was, well, there's not a strong female character in that. And I thought, okay, I'll give you a strong female character. I'm going to give you Giancarlo Alessi, this tough woman from the Lower West Side of Buffalo, Italian, first generation American, and Gia is about 30 years ahead of her time. She is a feminist. She is strong willed. She doesn't want to be Bishop's secretary or receptionist. She wants to be a private eye, which was pretty rare for women in
Mhm.
1942. So when she sees an advertisement in the paper for a secretary job at Bishop's agency,
Mm.
she applies for the job. She gets there before the office opens. She picks the lock and she's seated at the desk typing away when Bishop comes in that morning. And he immediately hires her on the spot. And like everybody else, falls in love with her. So Gia is a feminist. She isn't going to take any guff from Bishop or clients or other men. She's in many ways a better detective and more hard boiled than Bishop is. And she also, like you said, that Bishop needs her. She is the moral compass that he lacks. And she helps keep him on track and helps get him sober. And they have this romance that never they spent one night together before the book opened and nothing became of it, and they've become estranged, and now they're back together because Nick
That was
needs a
sad. Yeah.
he needs a driver because he can't find his car, so he hires Gia back to be his driver and eventual partner. um, so to answer your second question about Pearl Duguay and who is she, Pearl Duguay is a lounge singer, and she sings at the Chesame Lounge. And she was last seen leaving the Chesame
Yeah.
with Bishop during his 5-day blackout. Bishop does not remember this. Um, and she is missing. And the police find her purse, and it's empty except for Bishop's business card. And Bishop, when he wakes on that floor of the hotel room, like you read from the back of the book, there's two guns, two bullets have been fired from his gun, and the police think Bishop is a murder suspect because she was last seen with Bishop. His gun's been, well, they don't know this, but Bishop does. His gun's been fired, and Bishop is the prime suspect. So Bishop has to find Pearl Duguay, um, find her or her body, and so
That's the
I'm not
hard
going to
part.
give, yeah, I'm not going to give too much away,
No, we don't want
but
to. They got to read this. They're not going to
yeah.
believe it. They got to read this seriously.
Yeah, I don't want to give any spoilers away, at least not before May 1st.
Well, we've got a few more characters on the bottom here before I get to the next page. Whoa, we have Corbett and Oliver. And how come they tossed the place? And then in chapter 5, they send them in the wrong direction.
So, as I said, Bishop works at the Hotel Lafayette as the private detective, and so back in the 30s and 40s, and even through the 60s, I think they had house detectives who were there to protect the hotel, the guests, the property of the hotel, and the property of the guests. And so Bishop is that guy,
Yeah.
and Oliver is the assistant manager of the Hotel Lafayette, very straight laced, very by the book, and Corbett is the front desk clerk. So they're kind of integral to the workings of the hotel, and they're part of Bishop's other life as this hotel detective. So they're part of the story. And what's great about now that this book is growing into a series, the second book is going to come out in 2027. Is now I have these characters that were secondary characters or played a minor role in After Pearl, the novel we're talking about, but they can have an expanded role in the future books that are hopefully coming. So you can expect to see more of Corbett and Oliver in the future Nicholas Bishop novels as well.
Now let's get to the good part here. Okay, we have this really weird. Why is he concerned about the Nazis? Who is Flynn? And now we get to Doris.
So there's a lot of I have a lot of balls in the air. There's a lot
Yeah,
of subplots in this, a lot of threads that I'm pulling through the novel that
yeah.
hopefully all come together at the end. And the lawyer that Bishop sometimes does casework for, who hired him on the Brandt case, is Ira Weiss, and he's a good friend of Bishop's, and he's Jewish, and this is set in the early days
Yeah.
of World War II. And when Bishop goes to Ira's office, he's a storefront lawyer. Um, there's a couple instances of anti-Semitic graffiti on
Mm.
the outside of Ira's office, a Star of David, a swastika, and Ira's convinced that there's Nazis that are doing this in Buffalo. And Bishop says, well, he says he'll find out. It's probably just kids, but Bishop's going to take on this unpaid case for his friend to see if there are Nazis involved. And so what he does again, he asks um, friends of his or acquaintances to help. And one of the people that he asked is a reporter for the Courier Express, the morning newspaper in town, a man named Flynn, who's a wonderful reporter, but like Bishop, he has a drinking problem, and he is a drinking buddy of Bishop. And they share information because they're both on kind of the periphery of um, of crime. Bishop as a private eye, and Flynn as a investigative reporter. And so they share information. They do favors for each other. And Bishop just asks him, "Hey, are there any Nazis here in town operating?
Mm.
Have you heard anything?" And so again, trying to bring in it's a historical novel, trying to bring in the backdrop of World War II as the kind of the um, curtain that's behind all these cases, the war that's there's no one in sight of the war, um, and bringing in that historical piece to it as well. And I love that era. I love writing about that era, and it just seemed like a natural thing to do. And so now Bishop's on the trail of American Nazis here during wartime.
Well, I know that if you listen to the news, because I celebrate Passover, and some of the synagogues had anti-Semitic remarks, and then and one of the synagogues that had to close. That's how bad it was outside.
Well,
It
one of
it
the
hasn't
things,
changed, and there's been some schools where they had some anti-Semitic kids getting beaten up for no reason at all. And unfortunately, the people that are running the government up here have done nothing about it. It's
yeah,
sad, but
it, it,
it's everywhere. So when you brought that to light, I said, yeah, that could
it
happen very easily. It's scary.
it is scary. And one of the things about
Yeah,
writing historical fiction is you can look at something a period of time 80, 90 years ago,
yeah.
and I went to the public library here in town just to read through old excuse me, newspapers from that time, just to get a feel for things, get ideas, see what prices were like. And I was struck when I was reading these newspapers from 1942 how things haven't really changed all that much in the last 80, 90 years.
No,
Um, Anti-Semitism prevalent, the Middle East prevalent in the news, the economy in the news. Not much has changed except the names and dates. And so, one of the things that historical fiction offers is a way to explore these topics that we face today, but kind of soften it a little bit and put it in a historical context. And what I mean by soften is like not beating you over the head about what's happening in 2025, but soften it in that revealing to the characters in a historical setting of, and make them think about what's going on in today's world. And so that was one of the reasons that had me bring in that whole Nazi element to show that not really much has changed, and we still, as a country and a people, have a lot of work to do.
I agree with you. My grandmother lived it.
Yeah.
She was in a Polish concentration camp, and my other one was in Dachauer.
Wow. My dad was in Patton's
Let
Third
me tell
Army, and
you,
and Patton, he after the war was over,
yeah, it's
Patton
horrible.
made them tour the
Yeah,
concentration camps. So my dad never liberated one, but he toured it. And
that's right.
when you see something like that, a young man, what was he, 23, 24 at the time? I mean, that shaped his whole life, I think, moving forward about
Yeah.
why they fought the war and what does it mean to be a a good person, empathetic, um, who would stand up and fight against this.
That's right. So now we have what is Michigan Avenue important? Who is king? And why does poor Nicholas, I feel so bad for him because blindsided so many times. And what is the deal with his dog? Oh, the poor dog. I feel so sorry for him.
So again, Michigan Avenue, King, again, trying to create a world, trying to create this almost mytholized Buffalo, New York in 1942 in the specific neighborhood. Michigan Avenue is a major street here in town, a major thoroughfare. So it makes sense to have Bishop going to clubs and going to places along Michigan Avenue and Genesee Street and Washington Street, the surrounding areas. And King, again, another secondary character. He is a neighbor of Pearl Duguay, the lounge singer who's missing. Pearl Bishop finds out where Pearl lives. He goes there with his little one-eyed dog, who he doesn't know where this one-eyed dog came from when
He's
he
so
wakes
cute
up
though.
when he wakes up on the floor of his hotel room when he can't remember anything. There's the dog in his room, and he names the dog Jake, even though he realizes later that Jake's a boy name and the dog is female. And she's missing an eye, and she's a stray, or he stole it. He doesn't know. He can't remember. And so now Bishop has a dog. And when he goes to Pearl Duguay's apartment, it becomes very clear that Jake knows this apartment, that this was his former home, and then he meets King, a saxophone player
Yeah.
who is a friend of Jake, a friend of Pearl's, and walks in on Bishop, who has broken into Pearl's apartment just to find some clues and find a lead to learn something about this woman he's accused of murdering. And King shows up, with the sawed-off shotgun and wanting to know what Bishop's doing in the apartment and with Pearl's dog. So things are starting to come together at this point. The missing, where'd the dog come from? Who is Pearl Duguay? Things are starting to come together. All these loose threads that seem to be unconnected. I promise they really do get tied up by the end of the book.
Well, you know something, people, Nicholas is smarter than you think. That's all I will say.
He
He's
is.
really smarter than he. I mean, if he didn't drink, he probably would be a very good private eye with no problems. So you probably would hire him.
Yeah, and so
Whatever.
Bishop, whole book is Bishop,
Yeah,
trying to get back to where he was before the action
that's
of the
right.
novel started. He wants to get his PI business back. He wants to get Gia back, you know, as a receptionist or secretary, but mostly in his life romantically. He wants to find his car. He wants to stop drinking. So the novel really is about his struggle just to start getting back to what he was. Because as he becomes more and more sober
Yeah.
throughout the course of the novel, he does become a pretty good detective. He does have good powers of observation. He can make connections, but he has to get the monkey off his back. He has to get his drinking under control if he has any hopes of being successful and really living through this because he's very self-destructive.
Okay, now before I forget, Thursday, this is going to really blow some heads, let me tell you.
Uh-oh.
Dr. Gloria Mitchell and I, she's an activist. We're going to talk about some very controversial issues that I probably shouldn't say on the air, issues that are in the news today, and issues that she's working on to help all people, African American mainly, and what they've been going through. So on the 24th, we're going to talk about them. On the 29th, we're going to talk about UFOs and ETs, extraterrestrials. And on the first, Love Before COVID, it's an interesting book. And on the 5th, this is my field. I'm a reading specialist, and I have a reading master's and a whole bunch of degrees. And my reading professor and I are going to talk about phonics, prior knowledge, and predicting outcomes on my station because Dr. Cavuto trains me to make sure he keeps me alive. And on the 8th, the City of Magicians. And those of you that have anything that you want to talk about, you better tell me because I'm booked until the end of June.
It sounds like a great lineup.
I can't, it's like mind boggling that I'm doing this because it took me a while to get used to Restream because I'm so used to answering people. It's better than Blog Talk because the phone doesn't disconnect. So we have Elizabeth, and what happens? How does she react to what happens to Ira, and why does he close her case? What was her defense?
Again, I don't want any spoilers, so I'm not
Don't
gonna
get
share.
so we can
I don't
skip
think
that
I'm
one.
gonna answer that question fully, but I can tell you that Bishop closes the case
Yeah,
because he has found out that her husband was having an affair. Meyer was
yeah,
having an affair, but the woman is no longer in the picture. So, as far as Bishop's case is concerned, he's going to close it. And Elizabeth refuses to believe that um, Meyer would have an affair with that particular woman. Plus, he is still behaving like he is sneaking around and up to something. So she refuses to accept Bishop closing her case, and she wants him to continue and offers more money
yeah,
for him to continue. And of course, Bishop is completely broke, and he reluctantly agrees, even though the case won't go anywhere. But again, there's more to it than
Yeah.
that explanation reveals. So everyone has their own story. Everyone has their own motives, and they all come out what the motive is by the end of the book.
Not only that, since I've been doing Restream, which is an experience that I'm getting used to, right now it's on YouTube, LinkedIn, FaceTime, Facebook, TikTok, and X. It goes to all of those. I just
That's
want
great.
you to know. And then I send Gina, and this will send it to you, the videotape, and then you can put it anywhere you want, wherever you want. But I do know that when it goes on LinkedIn, you'll probably get a few hundred views.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, one of the shows I did about the Louis Chessman series, Ivory Bones, she got about 600 views on
Great.
LinkedIn, and people are buying the books. So obviously, I'm doing something right. Who knows
That's
what? Yeah,
no,
but it does, and people do listen to it afterwards. And then if some of my students that are into this thing, they listen to, and then they let me know what they think.
oh, good. Yeah,
Yeah, they will. You'll get views. So, what does Elizabeth think about Meyer? He's an interesting character. There's something about him that you want to get to know more.
Yeah, Meyer is her husband.
Yeah, I know.
He's an artist. He's kind of he's kind of more bohemian. He wears his hair a little bit longer than the fashion of the day. He teaches art. He produces art, and he fancies himself as a ladies' man. So he's Elizabeth is quite a bit older than Meyer, and now she is having suspicions that he's not being faithful, and so it's an interesting dynamic that's brought in that Bishop needs to find out if this is true or not, and find out if who Meyer is having the affair with, which he does. So it's an interesting couple.
Yeah.
It's a couple that obviously are going down separate paths. It seems, but their lives are quite different than Bishop's. You know, Bishop has never been to an art opening. He doesn't socialize with the society and the class that Meyer and Elizabeth run in. They live in a very affluent neighborhood in a very impressive house. So it is, again, Bishop kind of out of his element a little bit, um, researching and learning about this couple, and they are not what they seem to be.
Okay, we have a few more questions because I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about Reinelman and Doris and Elizabeth. How are they connected, and who is Schreiber? And then I was going to ask how you created the final scenes, but I think I better not say anything about that. With what
uh,
happens.
yeah, I don't want to talk about the final scene
Yeah,
because
that
that's
was
where.
interesting. I was like, what?
um, so I'm trying to. I don't want to again tip my hand too much,
Yeah.
but let me say that there's a lot of characters in the book. Schreiber that you mentioned, we're not sure who he is. You know, the Brants that we've been talking about, um, the Kriegers who live across or have a hardware store across from Ira's law office. There's a lot of characters who are shady, and as the novel unfolds, there's a lot of possible suspects who may have had motive or may have killed this missing lounge singer.
Mm.
And all those people that you mentioned at one time or another are suspects. And Bishop is trying to figure out which of these are just which of these are the ones who pulled the trigger, who pulled the trigger. Um, but it could have been any of those characters, and it's Bishop's job to stay sober enough to figure it out, figure out who those characters is responsible, and clear his name, and bring Pearl's killer to justice. So
Well, I just want you to know
I'll leave it at that.
this is what I do to books.
Yeah.
That's how I remember. I circle, write a question mark for the question and underline. When I wish to see the review, I gotta revise it. She's gonna. I wrote what I thought. I probably went a little overboard, but what the heck? I don't think I gave anything away. And when a
Okay.
book is really good, I get in trouble because I write t- I write too much, without giving away what happened. But when I was growing up, I had to read 10 books a week, and my mother made me take notes in the book, whatever.
Yep.
So that's what I mark them up for, and it does help. So, how did you create, without saying, how did you decide who actually took care of this person to Pearl?
Well, it's funny. I'm when I write, I don't write by an outline. So
Uh-huh.
when I start, I fly by the seat of my pants. And what I do, it's a little interesting. I'll write a chapter, and then I that's when I'll outline it. This is what happened. This took place here. These are the main characters. Here's the setting, and that just helps me see how the novel is progressing, how the plot is unfolding. And so if like I said, a lot of threads that I'm pulling through this novel, it helps me visualize if I've dropped in a subplot and need to go back to it or reintroduce a character.
Mm.
Um, so as I'm writing this novel, I'm kind of like Bishop. I'm kind of in the dark. I'm not sure who did it, and I'm trying to figure it out as Bishop is. Um, and so a lot of
That's
times
why.
it wasn't until the very end when I said, "Oh, this has to be the person that did it." But again, when I started on page one, I did not know that. And it's kind of that's one of the fun parts about writing mysteries for me is because I get to solve the puzzle like the readers are, and hopefully come up with a satisfying answer to the puzzle.
That's what makes it more credible because I've interviewed too many people, and sometimes they'll say to me, "I could tell from the first chapter who killed the person." It's
Yeah,
been, and I said, "Well, how did you decide on the killer?" "Oh, we decided it before." But sometimes when you're writing the book, that's not the right person as the killer or the victim. So I get like, "Oh, okay." So
he,
what's going to happen to Nick and Gia, and who are you bringing back in the next one?
the next novel, as I said, is
I
done.
can't wait.
It's titled The Falling Woman. It is coming out in the spring of 2027, so it'll be the
Oh
second.
God, I have to wait that
This,
long.
yeah,
So sad.
yeah, we'll be editing it this summer. So Nicholas Bishop will be back. It's the second in the Bishop series. Gia is his partner. She will be back. Um, you can, as I said, expect to see Corbett, the front desk clerk, have a more of expanded role. Same with Oliver. Um, and even some of the other secondary characters that are mentioned but not really seen or developed in After Pearl will have a larger role. So people like the local gangster Joey Bones, um,
That's sad.
the Bishop's mentor Lucky Teddy Thurston, who is mentioned in the first book, he'll come back. Bishop's mother comes back.
Oh,
She left.
nice.
She left him when he was young. So what's the nice thing about these characters in a series is that you can bring them back and develop secondary characters and make them primary characters in subsequent novels. So, like I said, I didn't have an idea for the second book when I agreed to write it, but I did have the setting, I did have the location, I did have the main characters, and that's the more than I usually have when I start out. And then I thought, well, I got all these secondary characters. They have stories, they have relationships with Bishop. Let's work them into a second mystery, and that's what the Falling Woman does.
Well, my new title, if all goes well, maybe, I took all five of my horror books and they're converting them into one, I truly hope. I'm kind of skeptical. It should be out the first week of June. It's called Inverted Reality, different title.
Yeah.
And it's all my five horror books. And like I said, part one is if you do the wrong thing, you wind up as a face in the mirror. What happens if your voice is silenced, wrongly accused? what if, and the third choice. The third choice gives you a chance to repent, relive it, or the choice is up to the mirror. It's scary.
It
And you
sounds
know what?
great.
It is. It's interesting. The only problem is that the last book I wrote, Voices from Beyond, was my best, and I got no reviews because the publisher did a really bad job. But
Oh.
then people don't understand why I wrote it, but I thought it was cool. So, where can we find out more about you and your work?
Yeah, you can follow me on social media. I'm on
Good.
Facebook. I'm on Blue Sky, Twitter, now X.
Yeah.
And but the most information is at my website, which is www.sgiwanu.com. My name's up on the screen. And there's a lot of information on my website about the books, my short stories, the events that are upcoming, promoting the book, as well as, trailers for all the novels. So there's a lot of information on my website, but I always tell people the most important page of my website is the last page. That's the contact page,
Uh-huh.
because I love hearing from readers. So if you've read my previous books, or if you're going to pick up a copy of After Pearl, I love to hear from you and love to hear what you think. And I answer all the emails that come my way. So read the books and then shoot me a line, and I'd love to chat with you.
Feel free to put it on my Facebook wall. You can.
Oh, thank you.
I don't mind doing that. I mean, that's why I'm here. I started to do this a long time ago, and I didn't think it would be going like for 15 years. But it's seriously fun. I enjoyed. I retired from teaching when my mom developed Alzheimer's, and I decided that I wasn't going to sit like a couch potato. So this makes my day. Thank you so much, everyone. It's beautiful. It's beautiful outside. I don't know where you are, but it's actually 60 degrees and I don't need a coat. But everybody read the book. I will promote the book. I will promote the stream. And have a great day, everybody. Let me just write end the stream.